Okay, good morning everybody. I don't know, should I say I'm sorry for making you come on this day, or I'm happy to make you come here on this day. It's a nice day, it's rainy, it's good, it's cold, but the warmth of the human presence I think overrides the cold and makes it warmth. I don't know if you agree or not. You do? Good. So, today I am happy also for a second reason. And this is what I wanted, what I had in mind at the beginning of the year, if you remember the first time we met. And happily enough, I've got some colleagues who are involved in presenting. And that's what I want to set, to inculcate as a habit, is that my colleagues present training sessions. Besides demo lessons, training sessions, it's worth it. You have so much to share, experience, theory, etc. And I think that you learn better from each other than from me. We all learn. I learn from any one of you, no matter the career age. I always learn from trainee teachers, and I learn from senior teachers, and we all learn from each other. I said, I am so happy, and it's my pleasure, it made my day, and I might say it made my year, that today I'm very happy to welcome Ms. Rim Ltaief and Ms. Sahar Thabet to co-present a training session about the topic assessment. And you are invited because of your choice. All of those who are invited today have been invited because they chose to attend this training session. But before I give the floor to the ladies, just a warmer. We have two concepts: assessment, evaluation. Do we use them interchangeably, or is there a distinction between the signification, the meaning of each one of them? If so, what is the difference? If they are the same and interchangeable, then you tell me why, and then we go to the next step. Assessment, evaluation.
Assessment is broader than evaluation.
So, you think that assessment is a broader concept than evaluation? So, not the same thing. They are not interchangeable.
Evaluation is not a technique of assessment. It's part of assessment.
So evaluation is part of assessment. It's a technique. Assessment is a broader term, broader concept. Does anybody disagree with this? Anybody has got an idea about what assessment is and what evaluation is? Assessment is a process. So, assessment is a broader concept. Assessment is a process. Then, if assessment is a process, what is evaluation? Product. So we're getting ahead. So, assessment is a broader concept. Assessment is a process. Evaluation is a technique. Evaluation is product. So, I think there's a general agreement that they are not interchangeable. That's right. Assessment is the process. Evaluation is the product. For example, a test sheet done by a student, an essay, a paragraph, an article, a presentation, a conversation produced by students. That's a product, that's evaluation. And it could be used for assessment. And because of that, assessment had different types: formative, summative, diagnostic, placement, etc., etc., etc. This session will be focusing on a particular type of assessment, which is summative. Summative means that you assign a value, A, B, C, D, A plus, A A minus, or 15 out of 20, 20 out of 20, 0 out of 20, or out of 100, or out of 50, or whatever. So that's a value. The value could be a number, could be a letter, could be stars. You could assess using stars. So 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars. That's also a way of assessing, giving a value, assigning a value. This year, the Minister has sent a circular where he talks about 2 types of assessment, summative and formative. Unfortunately, nobody told him that teachers have not been trained in using formative assessment. Formative assessment is very complex, and it needs at least 2 or 3 team training sessions as a start. It's more difficult, it's more complex than summative assessment. Having said that, I thank you very much, and I leave the floor to the ladies to present.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are here today to present our topic, which is entitled test construction.
Before you mark it upon our presentation, we want to have a brainstorming activity. So, when you said the word testing or test construction, you want to know what comes to your mind. Which technical verbs, which questions. Yes? Let's start. Any other grading system? Timing, yes. Yes, grading system. Grading? Level. Any other key terms? Timing, tasks, skill, the level for students. Okay. Questions. Tasks for questions. What do you have in mind before starting embarking on constructing your task? Of course, you can also ask, what did you teach? Okay. So we'll see.
So we seem to have some information about our topic, and we hope that you learn more from our presentation. Okay, testing and assessment are part of modern life. School children are constantly assessed, whether to monitor their educational progress or for governments to evaluate the quality of the school systems. Adults are tested to see if they have the necessary skills for promotion, or if they are to see if they are skilled or suitable for a job. Entrance to educational establishments, to professions, and even to entire countries is sometimes controlled by tests. So tests play a fundamental and controversial role in allowing access to the limited resources and opportunities that our world provides. But in order to know the meaning of testing, we should differentiate between the term testing and the term assessment. Assessment can be considered or referred to as measurement, and it intends to measure the effectiveness of instruction or generate proof that students are learning the intended outcomes stated in your objectives. And there are 2 basic types of assessment, which are formative assessment and summative assessment. Formative assessment attempts to measure learning as it is occurring or happening, which means that it evaluates, it is an ongoing or continuous process that is carried out every day in our lessons. However, summative assessment tries to sum up learning that already happened, and this assessment usually occurs at the end of the unit, trimester, etc. The second difference between the 2 types of assessment is that the primary goal of formative assessment is learning. However, the target of summative assessment is providing proof of learning, assigning a grade. Teachers use formative assessment to inform their teaching or to provide feedback to the students, while summative assessment is used by teachers to decide if the students have achieved mastery of the course. For the pupils, they use formative assessment to inform their own view or of understanding of the subject matter, and they use summative assessment to see whether they are capable of continuing in the field of study. Some examples of formative assessment include observations, question and answer sessions, homework. Even a simple remark like good job can be considered a form of formative assessment. As to summative assessment, it consists mainly of tests, midterm tests, end-term tests, etc. To clarify what I have just said, we are going to see a brief summary of the differences between formative and summative assessment in our next video. About the difference between the two types of assessment, and from this video we can see that unlike formative assessment, summative assessment occurs at the end in the form of tests, which suggests that tests are part of assessment, as you can see in this graph. So we have assessment and testing is part of it. Actually, testing is a technique of assessment that is generally concerned with turning performance into numbers. So a test is an outside thing that pupils do to get grades that can help them to recognize their levels and the levels of their schools at times.
Okay, let's look at some definitions of testing. So testing has been defined by Brown as a method of measuring a person's ability, knowledge, or performance in a given domain. It has also been defined by Hughes as a systematic method of eliciting performance, which is intended to be the basis for some sort of decision making. And finally, language testing specifically, although today it is the practice and study of evaluating the proficiency of an individual in using a particular language effectively. And should note that the word test can refer to traditional paper and pencil or computer-based tests like multiple choice, test fillings, short answers, or essays. Also, the word test can refer to performance assessments and by performance assessment in presentations, projects, interviews, etc. Usually, testing touches the four skills. There are different components that we could test. Why, for example, testing listening. So we can test for many more pairs. We can test note taking. We can test for cohesive devices. To our students here, cohesive devices while listening to a presentation. We can also test for comprehension. We can test for vocabulary. We can test for gist. Concerning the following skill, which is reading, we can test whether the students recognize some words. We can also test clustering, skimming, scanning. We can test reading for gist or reading for specific information. Higher up, we can see whether our students can imply or infer meaning. Can they summarize something that they have just read? Or can they evaluate or criticize? And here we can see Bloom's taxonomy. For writing, we can test with our students the items that we can test, sentence creation. Our students, can they develop paragraphs, essays, research letters, or narratives? Can they write academic writings or thesis? Here, of course, it's a higher level. It depends on the level of your students, and it's mainly, of course, it's for faculty later, not for our college or high school students. We can also test the process of writing. That is, can students identify their topic sentences, hooks, threads? Can they write introductions or conclusions? Finally, we move to how can we test speaking. So here we have two categories. So there are tasks that are concerned with long interactive speeches like interviews, role plays, discussions. The other category, it's also of long duration but which involve less interaction, like oral presentations, like picture cued storytellings, or like retelling story.
Okay. Testing can be either subjective or objective. For subjective testing, it usually requires judgment from the part of the teacher, and the questioning in it may have more than one answer or more than one way of expressing the correct answer. And subjective questions include extending the response questions and mainly essays. For objective testing, it usually calls for no judgment from the part of the scholar, and the questioning in it has a single correct answer, and objective question types include true-false answers, multiple choice, multiple response, and matching questions, as well as quizzes. In addition to subjective and objective, a test can be norm reference or criterion reference. The purpose of criterion reference test is to determine whether a student has achieved specific skills or concepts, and to find out what the student knows before instruction begins and after it has finished. However, for non-reference tests, the purpose or the objective is to rank a student with respect to the achievement of others in broad areas of knowledge. For score interpretation in criterion reference tests, each individual is compared with a preset standard for acceptable achievement. The performance of other examinees is irrelevant. However, in non-reference tests, each individual is compared with other examinees and assigned a grade or a score usually expressed as a grade.
Excuse me, could you give an example of determining whether each student has achieved specific skills or concepts?
It's like in our classrooms to see whether they, for example, mastered writing, listening.
For example, I think one example, we are asking students to produce a formal letter. So my criterion would be, one criterion would be that students know the components of a formal letter, the address, the greeting, the closure, etc. So that's one criterion, all right? And then I ask my students to produce a formal letter and see how many students managed to identify, how many students know which is which.
The layout.
Yeah, it has to do only with the layout. So that's one criterion. Once I see that my students have grasped, are able to respect those aspects of the format of a formal letter, an informal letter, an email, a post on a blog, or a post, a comment on Facebook or whatever, then I could proceed to other criteria. So that's what it means, criterion reference tests. It does not assign a mark. It just tells me about the existence or the absence of a mastery of a certain, of a specific aspect of learning. Norm reference is when you classify students according to performance, so that you can say, this is the best one, this is a high performer, and this is a low performer, and this is average. It could be done in different ways. It could be done, sometimes norm reference, the thing is done by taking 2 points of reference, the lowest performer and the highest performer, and then you range students according to that. Meaning that you compare learners, a learner community, from inside itself, not with reference to another reference. Not like national exams, is when you administer a test in your classroom, same class, and then you classify your students according to one another, to the community, that close community, and not in comparison with a larger community or with other communities outside the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this explanation. Now, although testing can have different characteristics, all tests share the same objectives, which are to assess how well the students are achieving the stated goals of the lessons and to evaluate the students' strengths and weaknesses, which might be useful for focus, practice, and individualized instruction. The third objective of testing is to provide a record for assigning grades. The grades which will determine who will receive awards, recognition, and scholarships. Testing also can be useful to provide a basis of qualification for entry into a school program, internship, higher education, etc. And testing are very important to measure a school or teacher's effectiveness.
Okay, so before constructing your language test, there are different aspects that you need to consider. Okay, for mentioning these aspects, we will start with watching a short video which summarizes these principles.
Escape. Rim, escape. Good. Double click. Double click on the video. Double. Okay.
Assessment is a hot topic around the world as it becomes more important to people's lives. But actually the basics are quite simple to understand. The key concepts are validity, reliability, impact, and practicality. So, validity. Okay, is your passport valid? Can you use it to go to and from countries? As a travel document, does it do what it's supposed to do for you? So it's valid. In the same way, if an exam really assesses what it's supposed to, then it's valid. Next, reliability. If an exam is worth anything, it must be reliable. It must give you an accurate report. Just like you want your watch to be reliable and tell you the right time, so we need exams to provide the right result. Otherwise, what's the point? Okay, now we're going to skip to the fourth element, practicality. So here, we're saying that you can have the highest principles in validity and reliability, but unless things work in the real world, unless we can manage the practical side of exams, like making them available when people need them or
Yeah.
So as we have seen different principles that we should consider.
Stop the video.
It was stopped. No, we don't have
Assessment is a hot topic around
Just a
the
minute,
world.
Rim, just a minute.
Becomes more
The video is
important
on.
in people's lives.
Close it. Yeah. No.
Okay, here it is. So as you have seen, there are four principles mentioned. So practicality, reliability, validity, impact, which we can also call washback, and I added here authenticity. Authenticity, I have found it in other literature. So let's go back to
Excuse
that one by
me,
one.
could you go back to that track, please? From the other. Yep. Oh, yep. Show the principles. So, what we mean by that, what do we observe from that? You and the audience. When we say practicality, what is meant by practicality?
It
Reliability.
works in the real world. Practicality means the test works in the real world. Means the student can take it in the real world.
So, according to you, practicality means that a test is practical as long as it is something that a learner might come across in real life.
Yes.
Does anybody? Do you agree? Is that what it is?
Yes, but for example, if a test takes you 10 hours to prepare, then the students do it in just 1 hour. That's not practical. There are different facets of practicality, actually.
So there are different facets of practicality. One of them is that something a student might come across in real life. The other aspect is that there's no use in you preparing a test for 10 hours to be done in quite a few minutes.
Yes, also we have the timing. The test shouldn't be too long or too short. We'll come across these details also later. But yes, reliability, what did you understand from the video?
How is a test reliable?
It gives you an accurate report on the student's level.
Excuse me?
It gives you an accurate report of the student's level of understanding.
So a test is reliable as long as it gives you an accurate report of the student's level, or let's say an accurate image of student's level of achievement in a certain subject matter. Any more ideas? Reliability could be that a test tests what you're supposed, or what is supposed to test. Could it be that?
Isn't that validity?
Isn't that validity? Oh. So that's not reliability, that's validity. So a test is reliable as long as it tests what we want it to test. Then, authenticity. What does that refer to?
Especially in testing English, we need to, your paragraphs, for example, your vocabulary need to be contextualized, your texts need to be taken from authentic resources.
Now, how do we know that the task is authentic?
The sources we need. We need to
Sorry?
Reference. English magazines, for example.
So,
English newspapers.
the norm for authenticity, something that is genuine, is that it is produced by a native speaker of the language, be it written text, or listening, or now we have what do we call it? Video comprehension, right? So, authenticity refers to the fact that the text has been produced by a native speaker, and only by a native speaker. Otherwise, it lacks one principle. It's not authentic. It's produced by somebody who's not a native speaker of that language. In this case, a native speaker of English.
We move to washback. Any ideas? Impact.
So, any colleague who can enlighten us about the principle washback. What do you mean by washback?
The effect of the test.
The effect of the test. In what sense?
Yes, it can be on the teachers, on the pupils, and also on the judicial system, just on the government educational system. So we'll see this in details.
Okay, good.
So let's carry on. So we start again with practicality. What is practicality? An effective test is practical. This means that it's not excessively expensive because some tests need different materials. Okay. Also, it stays within appropriate time constraints. As we said, it's not too long, it's not too short. It's relatively easy to administer. And finally, it should have a scoring or a procedure that is specific and time efficient. That is, even when correcting your tests, okay? It shouldn't take you too long. Second principle that we have seen is reliability. Reliability, it is the extent to which an experiment, test, or any measuring procedure shows the same result on repeated trials. So, we should ask here the question, if I administer this test again, if I give this test again to the same students, am I likely to have the same results? Okay, you give the same test at a different time, and you should normally have almost the same results. We move to the third principle, which is validity. As we said, is a test measuring what it claims to measure. A test is said to be valid if it measures accurately what it is intended to measure. For example, a grammar test should be made up of items testing knowledge of grammar and not knowledge of phonetics, for example. And here, if you can see the picture, so is the way test above valid. It says, I am 160 centimeters. Okay, that's an example of a test which is not valid. We move to the fourth principle, which is authenticity. In a test, authenticity may be present in different ways. The language in the test should be as natural as possible. The items should be contextualized and not isolated. And here, even when we give activities in our classroom, it's better to use paragraphs, etc., and not to give sentences where students have to fill with vocabulary. Topics also should be meaningful, that is interesting to the learners. And finally, tasks should represent or closely approximate real-world tasks. We move to the issue of washback. The washback effect of testing is primarily the influence of testing on training and learning. So there is a natural tendency for both teachers and students to tailor the classroom activities to the demands of the test, especially when the test is very important to the future of the students, and pass rates measure also teacher success. Here we talk about, in our country, baccalaureate exam, for example. Okay, so the washback effect, it can be on the micro level and on the macro level. When we speak about the micro level, we speak about the effect of the test on individual students and teachers, while macro level refers to the impact of the test on the educational system or on society. This influence of the test on the classroom is, of course, very important, but it can be beneficial and it can be harmful. So let's see where do we consider washback as beneficial and where it's considered as harmful. So positive washback, it's when tests induce teachers to cover their subjects thoroughly and to improve their teaching strategies. For the students, the positive impact of the test is when it motivates students to work harder and to have a sense of accomplishment. It also should incite students to prepare lessons thoroughly, to do their homework, to take the subject being tested more seriously. We move to negative washback. When we speak about negative washback, it's the negative impact of tests on students and teachers, of course. So, tests are considered to have a negative washback there when they encourage teachers to make teaching to the test curriculum. For example, some teachers may neglect certain skills or ignore some activities that do not contribute directly to passing the exam. For example, if you are preparing to end-of-term tests and you don't have listening, you may skip that listening test, okay, and we move on. So here we have the issue of testing, teaching what we test, or testing what we teach, okay? And here is considered mainly teaching to the test is considered as a negative washback. Okay, so for the student also, tests may have negative pushback. For example, we all know that and you have been students tests bring anxiety, they distort our performance sometimes, and they may develop, students may develop in this way negative judgment towards tests. They may study, take the test, pass it, and then forget what they learned. So, here we have already provided the sufficient features for you to administer and produce a good test. But however, also you need to consider what are you testing exactly. Are you testing competence or performance? Are you testing your students' background knowledge or what their learning abilities? And here you need to define your purpose. The purpose of the text will help you define which type of tests are you constructing. So here we have 5 types of tests. The first 2 types actually we are not likely to produce in our classroom settings, which are aptitude and proficiency tests. We'll explain them later. And we have 3 other types of tests which we will be likely to produce in our classroom settings, which are placement, diagnostic, and I forgot one. Aptitude, proficiency, placement, diagnostic, and achievement. Yes, that's it. Achievement. Okay, so we'll start with aptitude tests. Aptitude tests are designed to measure mainly the capacity or general ability to learn a foreign language. That is, they predict a person's future success in learning, and they are taken before actual learning. These are an outdated type of tests that are no longer really carried on. The second type is proficiency tests. The aim of proficiency tests is to test global competence or overall ability in a language, and proficiency test is mainly a test which measures how much of a language someone has learned. It's not linked to a particular course of instruction. It just measures the learner's general level of language mastery. It's like the TOEFL exam. Okay? It measures general level of language mastery. We move to the tests that we are likely to construct in our classroom. So, placement tests. They are intended to provide information that places students at a stage or another of the teaching program. Following is diagnostic test. For us as teachers, we usually carry on this type of tests in the beginning of the year. Diagnostic tests. They are designed to show what skills or knowledge a learner knows and what skills he or she doesn't know. It aims at identifying students' strengths and also weaknesses. These tests may benefit our future instruction as teachers, and they can be also very useful for individualized instruction. Last type of test that we will see today here, yes. 5th type is achievement test. That's that we carry on all the time in our classroom. So, achievement test is related directly to classroom lessons, to units, or even to total curriculum. They intend to measure how successful students are in achieving the objectives of our lessons or our course. Progress achievement tests, they hinge upon a series of well-defined short-term objectives, and they measure the progress of those students, and they are considered as summative, as we have seen earlier, carried on at the end of semester after a unit or 2 units, etc.
Now, in order to prepare a good and successful test, there are some guidelines that we need to consider. And the first of which is level of difficulty. The presentation of tasks in a test should be arranged from easy to difficult. Because when you start with the most difficult task, this will lead the weakest pupils to soon give up. The teacher also has to moderate his tasks by searching for feedback and revision made by other teachers. For a test to be successful, timing also has to be considered very carefully, and testers should give students a reasonable time to complete the test. Also, the layout, the presentation, the printing, the spacing, font size, and style are very important for a test. Now, a flaw that teachers need to avoid is bias, and it can result from experiential, cultural, or knowledge-based factors. teachers should avoid items or topics that might give an advantage to a particular group of students. Now, the test also should present a representative sample of the objectives, activities, and tasks taught or used in the classroom. We shouldn't give the pupils things that we haven't dealt with in our classrooms, because this will be very difficult for them. You cannot, for example, give a first-year pupil tasks that you normally give to back pupils. It's really impossible. Now, the tasks also should be clear, they should be simple, unambiguous, and they should provide a clear indication of what the task demands from the students. Finally, the selection of the questions and texts will depend on the purpose and the formats chosen by the designer of the test. Now, in this presentation, we tried to give you an overview of testing, of its definition, objectives, principles, types, and guidelines, and at the end, we would like to stress the fact that our world is changing, and so are our educational systems. Therefore, our tests should keep up with these changes. And to stress the multiple nature of tests, we are going to show you our next video.
In the beginning, assessment was simple. We give something a try. It was obvious when we did not succeed. And it was obvious when we did. This became known as learning. Then formal education emerged. And we invented universities and lecture halls, lesson plans, and final exams. We tested students to see if they learned anything. And then we assessed our own effectiveness as teachers through anecdotal questionnaires and subjective end-of-semester surveys. And this might have been enough when we were graduating high school and college students to take predictable jobs with predictable career paths. But today, educators and students are part of a rapidly changing world. 21st century learners must be able to synthesize knowledge, communicate clearly with others, and create solutions to problems that we don't even know exist. Which means students need personalized, engaging, useful feedback on meaningful work. Not multiple choice exams and unexplained letter grades. So whether you're teaching accountants, engineers, artists, welders, scientists, or nurses, your students need detailed feedback on meaningful work so they can become learners, not simply graduates.
So that was all for today. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, we would like to know if you have any questions, if you have any feedback, any comments.